Well, the governor announced water policy proposals last week containing four proposed pieces of legislation. The first and foremost piece is the legislation that will be unveiled that will repeal the use it or lose it provisions in the Kansas Water Appropriation Act. And basically what that will do is water right holders in closed or restricted areas will no longer have to prove due and sufficient cause for not using their water, and they'll be able to keep their water right without having to do any special reporting and come up with a justification for keeping that water right. And that will change the culture of consumption of water to more of a culture of conservation, and that way there is really no reason or anything in state law that would prohibit a water right holder from saving water if he or she chooses to do so. So we think that's a really good step forward in kind of changing the culture out there and remove the disincentive to use the water right when you don't want to or have to. The other piece of legislation is the creation of some local authorities to regulate water. Currently, the vast majority of water use regulation rests with the chief engineer through prior strict appropriation administration, or IGUCAs, which is the intensive groundwater use control areas. The new proposal the governor unveiled is the local enhanced management areas, which came out of groundwater management district number 4 and some local initiative to try to come up with some reductions that local folks want to do. And this will give them some more autonomy and take some of the control away from the chief engineer in terms of establishing controls on water use out there. It gives the locals the opportunity to kind of chart their own destiny and set the levels that they would like to reduce, and gives them some assurance that the state of Kansas won't come in and trump their efforts. And so we think this is a really important piece of legislation that will basically allow folks that have already tried to take this initiative, it gives them some greater assurance that they will have control of their own destiny. And so we're really applauding them in Northwest Kansas inside of GMD4, and hope that this tool will work well for them as they move forward in their management of their groundwater future, and we hope it's replicated to other areas of the Ogallala Aquifer. The third piece of legislation is expansion of the Kansas Water Banking Act. This act has been around for a good number of years. It was very restricted when the law was established. It only allowed for 2 banks to be established, one groundwater and one surface water. The only bank that was created was in central Kansas and had very little activity. And so we're proposing an expansion of the bank, and we're proposing some rule changes to the bank based on a prior evaluation of the program. And we hope this legislation will provide another tool that can be used over the Ogallala in instances where we want to trade water and use water for different purposes. The water banking will allow us to meet that goal, and it does have a nice 10% conservation component in it. For folks that want to get into the water bank, they will have to take 10% of the water off the top and then allow more flexibility on what that water is used. And it can actually be maybe used for a higher purpose if there's one that exists in the area, or it will help irrigators who are a little short on water. They can actually go to the bank and buy the water to help raise their crop when another water right holder and irrigator may have excess water that they don't intend to use. So it will allow us a little more flexibility to manage water with the conservation component of 10%. The last piece of legislation that the governor announced is actually one that really is more of a flexibility tool than it is a conservation tool, although it clearly can have conservation savings on a given situation. But what it will do, it'll change the 5-year flex account program that we currently have in state government, and it'll allow the irrigators to take basically an amount of water that they can use annually, take it times 5, and then let them use that 5-year total as they see fit. So in 1 year they could actually go over their annual amount, but in the subsequent years they'd have to go under in order to make that stay within that 5-year total. Typically what you see in those situations is as you have a 5-year flex account total, is the irrigators will actually be more conservative with the water when they can be, and save as much as possible, so that if they get into a drought like we were in this year, it gives them some additional tools to use in drought years. And so many times at the end of these 5-year flex periods, you can actually have water left over at the end. because the water right user has been very conservative in its use. So giving them flexibility and more ownership in it, we believe can result in water savings. And that's not the intent of this, is to come up with a very firm quantifiable savings, but we think the savings opportunities will be there, particularly when we get into wetter cycles. So the Flex account is a good tool for us to implement right now, given we are still in a drought in the Ogallala. It will give those irrigators more tools that they may need next year if the drought continues. But at the same time, if we happen to get into a wetter cycle, we'll see some water savings at the end if Mother Nature helps us out a little bit. So those are the 4 key pieces of legislation the governor unveiled last week, and we're having 4 public meetings coming up to go out and further explain the proposals to the public and prepare for the 2012 legislative session.